Jim, you have neighbors that might have offered help with the oven.
That's right. We could have, right? So just a second ago, we used a phrase that's kind of an interesting phrase to use. It says, you never know where life will take you. How many know that that's true?
Yeah.
Still try to control both past and future, even though we never really know.
Right.
So at least part of dealing with our fear is to figure out how to take steps into those directions that we can't control. We can't change the past, although Buddhism would say you can. You can't, that the past is not static, but that to do something about those moments in a more positive way. How to deal with all the fear that comes out of the past and looks towards an uncertain future and deal with it better than what right now tells us. So there's something that I probably should have done last week, but I want you to look at it this week. It's from the back of your book. I don't know how many of you have a book and have been looking at the practices in the back, but somewhere there's, so this is part of what I'm going to send out to you. It's these practices for transforming fear. It won't look exactly like this because I took this piece from the page before and cut and pasted it into here, this little piece. And so there's a couple paragraphs. I just wanted to get it onto 2 pages rather than 3 pages. So it says 8 simple mindfulness exercises, but we're going to start with just 4 of them. And they're pretty simple practices. They are just breathing practices. And you'll notice in our chapters that he uses the extension of those practices. That's why I wanted to show you this. So look at what exercise 1 is. You just simply breathe. You breathe in, you breathe out. And you say this, breathing in, I know this is an in breath. Breathing out, I know this is an out breath. So that you become aware of your breath and you think about it. Exercise 2 takes it a step further. It says, I follow my in-breath, right here. I follow my in-breath all the way from the beginning to the end. So that you become larger in your awareness of that breath. And you're thinking about it. And breathing out, I follow my out-breath all the way from beginning to end. You see those 2 exercises and what they do? They're increasing your awareness. They are increasing the depth of your awareness. Exercise 3 takes it a step further. Breathing in, I'm aware of my whole body. Breathing out, I'm aware of my whole body. Not just where the breath goes, but also the fingertips beyond the breath, the toes beyond the breath. That you're bringing into your awareness something larger than just what that breath means, okay? And then the fourth one is taking it 1 step further. Breathing in, I'm aware of my whole body. No, where's this at? Oh, I'm missing it. Oh, breathing in, I'm aware of some tension and pain in my body. Breathing out, I am calm and release the tension and pain in my body. So not just are you aware, but you're also actively doing something in your body. You recognize where it is that something's not quite right. Okay? See those 4 steps? When I send this to you, I want you to practice those 4 steps on a regular basis. Some of you have probably already done these. But you want to get to the point where you're ready to start using the breathing in and out to do what he's having it do in our exercises. Because in our exercises, as we look to the past and the future, not only is your body going to have places of tension, but you're going to realize that your soul has places of tension. How many have at least something from your past that's not quite perfect? Something that still affects you to this day, right? And that you have to learn how to have a better relationship to. That's what this is about. How many have at least some fear looking forward about what might not go right, or something out of your control. Those two directions that we can look are not wrong things to look. I hope you noticed as he's talking about past and future, he's not saying they're bad. He's not saying that you don't deal with them. You don't ignore them by being in the present. You bring those into the context of present. They are subordinate to right now. And how do we have the right relationship to both of those extensions of us and bring them into this moment right now? So in the past, the issue is this. How do you reconcile? How do you, with all of that stuff that wasn't perfect, all of those people who somehow hurt your journey, how do you in this moment take and reconcile them so that they can be the best possible, not just whatever it was that they did to you in that moment? So think about some space that you went through in your past. And in here, he uses the example of thinking about your 5-year-old self. And so breathing in, you think about your 5-year-old self. Breathing out, you think about your 5-year-old self, right? And not just think about, I see myself as the 5-year-old, and as you breathe out, I smile to that 5-year-old. Now, maybe for you, it's not the 5-year-old. Maybe it's the 17-year-old where something happened to you. What is that moment in your life that scarred you in some way or another, or continues to speak a certain message because of whatever pain, struggle, problem it gave to you? And as you breathe in, you accept that that part, that piece of your life is part of you, and you smile at it. Because generally those parts that hurt us, smile is not our first reaction to them, is it? And yet you are who you are today, partially because of that. This week, because of the fire up on the hill, I'm strongly reminded of another fire that happened a few years ago, swept across northern Arizona, biggest fire in U.S. history, right? Over 500,000 acres, called Rodeo Chetiskyi, if you remember that fire. Yeah. And it swept right across one of my most painful and most transforming spaces, right? Happened on a road right up near Heber. And so I've been very acutely aware of how that terrible, hurtful, struggling time of my life was also that which helped me to become who I am today. And are there things I would like to have changed, done different, been different, do something with back then? Yes. But as I look at it also, in the reconciling that I've done around those events, they also turned me into the very best Jim that I could be. Right? I'm much better because of that. So think about one of your spaces. And we're just going to breathe in and breathe out a couple of times. And breathing in and out. So I'm going to look at my 27-year-old. Okay? That space where I went through that struggle. We're going to breathe in and you're going to recognize that person. And breathing out, you're going to smile at that person. However flawed, however difficult, however challenging that person was in that moment. So breathe in. And breathe out. And breathe in and remember. Breathe out and smile. Breathe in and breathe out. Now, how many solved your whole child? Fixed it in
I'm
those?
having so much trouble with the background noise and the difficulty I'm having listening to you right here and now. It's Judith talking.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. The hard part is we can't control all the background noises. If you know you have a background noise, you might want to mute yourself just for that amount of time. It's difficult always to do that because what we really want in spirituality is magic wand spirituality. Fixed it, right? And it doesn't quite fix that well. But we do work hard to reconcile and transform and take whatever happened back then so that it comes forward not as a fear of how to deal with today, but a strength in dealing with today better. So think about some of the ways you've carried fear into the todays of your life, and they emerged less effectively than what you wished. Some of the ways where fear hurt your approach to the present. Yes, Leticia.
My little outburst at the top back, I have really been struggling with that because it wasn't about my words, it was about my emotional passion that came through with it.
Yeah.
And realizing that even though I didn't use strong language and I didn't really attack the tone, and I did one of these into the screen, right? I've been having to reconcile that.
Yeah.
Because the reaction was based in fear
And
and not for myself.
Yeah. And there's several ways why that can trouble you. Sometimes it's the voice from the past that says, be a good girl and don't, right? And sometimes it's because whatever that other person said touched on some nerve of how somebody else has done it. How you have reacted wrongly in the past, and so you react in the same way. But what you have to do is not just, you don't want to throw blame on yourself for that moment. You have to say, okay, something happened right then. How do I now figure out what it was that happened in that moment? What was that which touched my fear? How about the rest of you? How are you trying to reconcile with that child of the past?
Am I muted or not?
You're there.
Oh, good. Nancy, I was thinking back, and my fears didn't really arise until 1978 when my daughter, am I being recorded?
Yes.
Okay. My daughter developed paranoid schizophrenia and manic depression, which later became schizoaffective, and self-medicated with alcohol. And at my most vulnerable, my husband finally said to me, I'm gay, I've always been gay, and I need you to know that means things will change. And I went through 10 years of utter fear, during which time both of them tried suicide, and I rescued all the way through. And really my fears were only allayed when both of them passed into the next life. And one by her own hand and one by other physical means. But I lived so many years in fear.
Yeah. What you're speaking of, Nancy, let me show you the first quote. When I send out my quotes, you'll notice that my things always kind of take on this type of a format, where I will have a quote and then a question around that quote. So here's my first quote that I have. Our original fear isn't just from our own birth and childhood. The fear we feel comes from both our own and our ancestors' fear. Our ancestors suffered from hunger and dangers. That kind of fear has been transmitted to us. Every one of us has that fear inside. And by this, he does not mean just our physical ancestors, not just the ones who gave birth to us physically, but also the spiritual ancestors and the ones who come around us, like a daughter and a husband, who live with us in the midst of it, of our past, and bring something to us. And so part of our fear that we have to deal with today is not even our own fear. How many learned something from a parent or a grandparent who had to live through the depression and brought some of those things forward? You know, like my daddy loved bread and milk as a dessert, and I hated it, but yet sometimes that was our dessert. And I had to like deal with the fact that, Dad, why are you making me eat this? Now that's a very simple example, but that emerged out of his growing up in the depression. How many of you have dealt with something from your depression parents, right? Or from some other piece of that? How about how many of you have dealt with the patriotism that marked World War II versus how we're defining patriotism today? Very different definitions, right? That derive out of a different set of fears, a different set of definitions. How many? Yes, Catherine.
Yeah, I'm also thinking that when you said, I said World War II and then I'm going to bring it home. I'm going to bring it to today. I have, sure, like everybody else, I feel immersed in this racial injustice. I feel overwhelmed by it, and I continue to look at my own place and my own heart. I grew up in the Midwest in our hometown, and the only Black people I ever saw as a child were missionaries, or people that came to the Methodist Church, or people who were at the university. It was a college then, and it was a Methodist related. It was called Lawrence College, and then became Lawrence University, and it was Methodist affiliated. So I think I was afraid of Black people because I didn't know any, and I didn't really know what to think, and I thought some things were wrong, but I was so ignorant. And I think I've spent a lot of my life being ignorant. And I realize that I still am in some regards. I happen to have known 3 people. One was a man that I met that was a friend. Another, I have 2 friends, and they happen to be Black women, and they've taught me some things. They're contemporaries. One is about 10 years younger than I, and the other is my age. And I've been friends with Corliss, who lives in Raleigh, who is a couple years younger than I, which means she's 71. And my other friend is in her 60s. So the point being is I still have, I think in my eyes, I still have some blind spots. And I'm looking at those, and I'm trying to think, how can I be better and different? How can I address some of these things? And I realize, you know, I don't know that my parents were prejudiced. I think they were just the same way, ignorant in some regards, not bad people at all. But we were so unschooled.
Right.
And I got married, and I was 20 years old, and I went to live in South Dakota. And I remember, and I was pretty naive in a lot of regards, and part of it was about men. And this Black man approached me in a center. It was like, you know, like a place to get like a canteen, a place to get something to eat. And my husband wasn't there. There was another guy that was like an acquaintance of ours. And I did something. I went to get some some water or do something, but I was in this room, and this man approached me, and I think he tried to kiss me or some darn thing, and he happened to be black, and I just was freaked out. I didn't know how to respond, and I don't know what the other guy did, because my husband was maybe in the restroom or something, but I was overwhelmed by that, because I was pretty young. So my thoughts go back to, what do you know and believe, and then how your experiences color you. And then I lived in the South. I lived in Louisiana, in Shreveport, Louisiana, and that was a real shocker. So where am I going with all of this? So it's to be able to look at the past and to realize that, a lot of fear is unfounded, or it is based on such limited experiences. And how do you combat that? And what can we do today? And what can I do? So I'm being very thoughtful about it in the moment. And I happened to go to the library to pick up a book, and there was a lady who was a black woman who was coming out, and we exchanged pleasantries, and then we talked about things together. And I could, in the moment, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back or anything by any means, but I realized that I could make a difference in my encounter with her, to see her as a sister, as someone just like me. And we talked about that together. And I felt that this is the only way that we can fix this. I don't know that I'm going to go to a march or anything like that. I might, but how can I do it? I can do it one-on-one. I can do it day by day in my encounters with my fellow human beings, and not treat anybody different, but treat them the way I want to be treated, and to see them, really see them, whoever they are, not just Black people, but every persuasion, because so many people in our world have been marginalized. And I apologize for turning this into such a discourse here, or a oratory, but obviously I feel strongly about it, and I see how far back it really goes. Thank you for listening.
No, thank you for sharing that. The problem is that whatever thing we have from our past, let's call the man who was there with you, Joe, that Joe affects your perception, my perception of the next Joe.
Yeah.
However we identify this situation with that situation. Okay. And it's hard for us to separate. And this next place, both by time and by person, is not the same. And it's hard for us, though, not to go back to whatever that other was.
Well, I think the thing that I know now is that I've had to get woke up. I love that phrase, woke up.
Yeah.
And my gal who's younger than I, because I inadvertently made a sassy, smarmy remark to her at one point in time, and boy did she call me out on it, and boy did I need it.
Yeah.
and I thank God for people that speak truth to me. and I've had plenty of experiences that allow me to be delighted in people who are different than me, but yet the same. And the friendship and the caring, because I realized once again, we just can't begin to appreciate or understand what it feels like. And I think if we haven't known, we must know now. Yeah. We don't begin, I've never had it that tough that I have to worry about my sons, except in a general way, but how I have to think that they might die that day because they was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yeah. And that, that the struggles that people have, I don't think we do have any as white people. Honestly, I know that I don't know what that's like. I can only imagine it, and that's an approximation of day in and day out. Just because you're Black, you're ostracized, or you're looked upon or frowned upon, or put into some other category in place, and I don't want any part of that. I don't want this to continue any more than most of us would want this. I don't want this for anybody that I love.
Right.
And I want to be colorblind. I
And-
want to be colorblind.
And the problem, Catherine, is that most of us don't have any conception of all that goes into why it is we view this situation the way we view it. Right? There's a lot of different competing factors. A lot of it, for example, in racial things, can be tracked back to the early 1900s. One of my
And before then, yeah.
One of my friends compares, well, but I mean early 1900s, because in that period, we changed race relations a lot. There was a very active set of, most of the statues that are being torn down now weren't built right after the Civil War. They were built in early 1900s.
That's true too, yeah.
Overall, in reaction to a particular movie, right? A movie, a huge movie by D.W. Griffiths, one of the first.
Yeah, Birth of a Nation.
Birth of a Nation, which had a particular story around race relations. We often react out of that space where black was turned into always evil, always bad, always plotting, always, all kinds of stories like that. And we have continued almost unthinkingly carrying on many of those kinds of stories, sometimes not even aware of it. But we do that in all kinds of different men and tell stories about women and who they are, not looking at this particular woman in front of us, and vice versa. So
Well,
that's not to excuse any of you.
And the other part of this is to bring it up, and because we have a large population of Native Americans in Arizona, same damn thing.
Yeah.
Same thing, exactly. The Indians were always portrayed as on the warpath, killing and scalping and you name it.
That's right.
The myths.
That's right. And so what he says, but he says the child is calling for your attention, but you have no time for him and her. You are too busy. You conceive of yourself as an adult, but in fact, you are also that little girl or boy who is deeply wounded and afraid. And what you have to do is go back to that deeply wounded and afraid child, whether they were 3 or 10 or 15 or whatever age, and you have to somehow help them to move beyond just the wounded and afraid that they were at the time. You have to draw them into the today where you are different than just that. And it's not that that is horrible, it's that it's affecting you to a larger extent than what it should. It's taught you, but sometimes it's still acting as if you haven't been taught. And you want to live into who you are today because of that teaching, not go back to what you were before that teaching. Leticia.
I had an amazing father. And he was in Korea the first year of Korean conflict as a reserve with the Marines. He was infantry mechanic. So, they refer to Marines as fodder, right? Because they're the first ones to go in. Well, he was the fodder. And in the Marine tradition, he's known as a frozen chosen. He was in the Chosin reservoir, and half of the troops that winter froze to death because they didn't have. So he came back, and we used to wonder, because he'd refer to the Gooks, but that wasn't his reference to, in terms of racism. He went to school and had a lot of friends that he loved dearly that were of Americans of Chinese heritage. The Gooks were the people that were after him to kill him. It took us a long time to understand that he had different words. But out of his fear and what he witnessed, he never really talked about the horrors he saw, he talked about how it taught him how precious life is, how fragile life is. And the gift that I feel he gave me is under stressful situations, under seeing such terrible stuff going on. I always have that viewpoint as step back, people, because life is fragile and life is precious. And even words are violent.
Mhm.
I think that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of on myself for that passionate outburst, because I don't know what somebody else's experience is. Just doing this into a screen could set something off, and I try and be very mindful of that. And it's a daily practice. It's a minute practice, and it's hard for all of us. So when you're considering that, you may be reacting on a fear that you learned from your parents, you learned from your community. Catherine, a lot of your experiential stuff is just where you were raised. You didn't have the opportunity to interact with people.
That's right.
And
okay.
it's, I'll stop.
Thank you.
And the difficulty of that is how many have at least one scallywag in your ancestry? Somebody that you don't quite admit to as easily. Right? Like the Wilbanks, we like to say the first Wilbank, Cornelius was his name, floated in on his wooden leg. We're not asking past that. Who knows what he came from, what he did, why it was that he was what he was. But he is part of who I am. Right? As are some of those that were less than acceptable in your background. All of those people helped to make the family that made you. And in going back and saying what possible thing came out of that, not making that person into a good person, but saying what good came out of whatever that action was that person was. How did it help their daughter to become a stronger, different person because of that? How did a son arise out of that? Or a nephew or a grandchild that was different? Because all of that helped to form the you that is the you right now. Right? And again, don't look at just your physical ancestors. Think also of those teachers who are your spiritual ancestors, the good ones and the not so desirable ones. Who are all those people that spoke and continue to speak in your life? And how do you help them to be the most positive voice possible? Because your harshest teacher also helped you to learn something, even if it was just patience. Right? So how are you letting their voice continue to have, how are you letting their voice be the best possible? It means you might have to turn off some of what they were saying or trying to make you understand. That some of what they said, you're going to have to say, that's not true. And you're going to have to say to that child, what I know is better than what you knew. And that's how you draw that past into this present, is you say, okay, you were trying to teach this, but here's what I know is true about that. Who is it that you need to reconcile with? Who are those voices that are struggles for you? The hard part is each one of us have different ones. And where I might have a really good mother role model, your struggle with the mother figure might be very different from mine. And so you're going to have to figure out, where else do you hear some of what mother could have taught you? Who else has taught you those kinds of things? Where I might have to struggle with something else in my background. Something that is no issue at all for you. In fact, may even be a very strength for you. But we all have to reconcile and draw the very best out of our past, not just the negative that's there. Okay? Let me show you one more quote. Oops. Let's do it this way. Oops. All right. Just about everybody has some blood relatives whom we admire and others who had many negative traits and of whom we are not proud. They are all our ancestors. All of those people, even the ones you don't know at all, were your ancestors. How are you going to draw from all of their strength? All you need to do is visualize the presence of your ancestors inside you. You are their continuation. Only when you make peace with them can you be 100% in the moment. If we're busy being drawn back to those other voices, it means we're not hearing perfectly the voice that is today, the voice that is this moment. If that other voice is speaking and overriding what's happening here, we deal with the here less well. So what's one of the voices that you listen to somewhere from the past? What has power over you from the past?
My father.
Uh-huh.
My father was a very intelligent, articulate, strong person, strong personality, and he was in charge of the household. And my mom was very gentle and loving. She was a librarian. My dad was a business person.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved them both, and they both were wonderful models for various things. But one time I did something that was not good as a teenager, 12, 13 years old. And my father, his comment was to my mom, and she told me this, which I haven't quite forgiven her for. He said, "How could she be so stupid?" Now, that cut me to the core, and it has been this place in me where my father was critical of how smart I was, and I had spent my life getting all A's and doing the best I could, and not much more than that too. I just was driven to prove that I was not stupid, and and then those words still come up for me every once in a while.
Yeah.
How could I be so stupid? And that's exactly what it was, like that. And I'm not stupid, but
No, not.
man.
But that's the reconciling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Trying to say that's not the truth.
That's not true. And it was a motivation for me to do a lot of things in my life that I'm very proud of.
Yeah.
And every now and then something will happen and I'll revert back to, man, that was so stupid.
And in fact, he might not have meant it in the harsh and critical way that it sounds like. He might have meant, Elizabeth is so much smarter than that. Why is it?
Yes, yes.
How did she make this mistake? Yeah, right. But that's not how it came through.
That's not, yeah. And so it drove you a whole different way.
That's why I blame my mom for not having moderated the statement a little bit. So
Yeah.
it wasn't so damaging. But she didn't know. She had no idea how I would take it.
Can I bring up one of the voices for me? Bad girl. I was punished very severely for something I didn't really even understand. And when I came to understand it, I realized it really wasn't bad. It was just bad in the terms that my parents understood it to be. And that's always stayed with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's affected just how there was a period of my life where I just said, "You want to see a bad girl? I'll show you," and I just kind of just did everything I could to just get under their skin. And then there was a point where I realized, it's not really hurting them, it's me. And I need to do what is good for me and let go of that. But I still have times where I just hold myself back from
certain things because I'm hearing that voice.
Yeah. I wonder how often we allow something that was meant as a relatively temporal thing, right? A transitory thing, and we turn it into a permanent. And we take it as a statement about the whole of us, when it really wasn't even meant that way, but yet we hear it that way or internalize it. Give it much more power than it ought to have. It's hard.
For me, the hardest thing is my mom. For years I've said she and I have a contentious relationship, and I have one with one of my daughters, who I call my mini me. I'm my mom's mini me. She didn't think she was going to have me, so for years I've heard, I have 2 children, and then this one came along. So my 5-year-old, it took my 5-year-old 53 years to resolve that.
Yeah.
And getting to that point and giving ourselves permission to say, I'm not 5, I'm not the 17-year-old pregnant girl. And I looked at when I was raising my children, the only thing I could tell myself is my mom wasn't perfect. So what are the things that she did that harmed me that I worked for 40 years not to pass it on?
Yeah.
That's all I could do.
Yeah. How many of you, unlike Leticia, are perfect at dealing with your own children? Because we know she's real messed up that way, but the rest of us, no problems at all, right? And we carry on some of those same issues. Some of the things that mom taught us wrong, we become mom for our kids. And we have to work hard sometimes to turn off some of those voices, or choose which ones are the voices to hear and replicate. Because the same mom who sometimes told us a wrong thing also told us other things were right, good, should replicate. And trying to figure out which ones we grasp hold of and carry forward is the struggle, right?
The key for me is I couldn't resolve it until I also looked at the strengths she provided me.
Yeah. And allow that to be the larger voice. Sharon.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. A Buddhist nun that I know, one tool that she taught me was when you're in the midst of something and you have like a really strong emotion, like you get angry or you're having fear or anxiety, to ask yourself, how old do I feel right now? And often when I do that, it's like I go, oh yeah, that I learned that when I was 7. Well, I'm not 7 now, it's like that kind of doesn't apply to my life as an adult. And I'm working on that a lot right now. It's a little scary that I'm in my 60s and I'm still trying to be an adult, but that's how it is right now. So I'm really intrigued by this exercise that Thich Nhat Hanh talks about actually spending time thinking about, events like at age 7 or whatever. And so rather than trying to just kind of, pick yourself up and repress that and just move on and be an adult, rather really looking at it and being with that in a compassionate way. I really believe what he says, that if we practice that slowly, that fear or that, that's going to kind of dissolve because you're giving it attention. It's like they always say, what you resist will persist, whereas if you look at something and kind of bring it out into the light, then it gets healed. So I really love these exercises.
Yeah. The hard part is that if we only put a singularity to that past story, we miss it. We miss the opportunity. That's why Buddhism says the past is not static. Buddhism says you can go back and rethink, reimagine, change that past, whatever story was there. But it does take sometimes some work to sit in there in that space and imagine something different, right? And so when you do that, just that simple breathing in and breathing out, that smile, it may take a few times of crying with that 5-year-old before you get to the smile with the 5-year-old, right? It may take a few shouted words, right? Whoever that ancestor is, that little child that you have to deal with, there's a lot of good ways to heal that individual. Bring them into the power of this moment differently.
Sharon, thank you so much for what you just did right now in the moment, because wow, I have been struggling with something and just some little challenges, and you just gave it to me right in the moment. So thank you. I now have a tool I didn't have before, and I know it's going to help because I'm going to emblazon it on my forehead. So if you ever see me with that on my forehead, that's what I'm going to do. Thank you. Thank you. That is powerful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Who else? Ed.
This is definitely not my most traumatic thing, but I was bullied an awful lot in growing up in the grade schools by kids that were much older than me in my class, and I happened to be a shrimp until I reached 19. I was much shorter. So I was living in Phoenix and relying on bicycle and bus for transportation, and I was trying to practice a thing where everybody that got on the bus, I says, there goes another version of me. And this one guy got on who was a huge hulk of a man, with all of the skulls and crosses and body and shirt and such. As he was walking down the aisle, I thought to myself, well, somehow he's just another version of me. We never made eye contact. He walked on by and sat behind me. A couple of miles later, I got off the bus, and I had the time to walk across the street in the light while the bus was there. But when I got the other corner, I heard this guy, somebody else, hey! And it was him. He was off the bus in the other opposite corner. So I sat there and waited until the light changed, and he walked across. He handed me a cheap $1 pen, said, "You dropped this on the floor." And the bus driver waited for him to walk on back and get back on the bus. But it was an instance of how all my fears of bullies, which were well incarnated in this guy, was a shift in my life because of a practice that I had developed of trying to see people the same as myself.
Thank you, Ed. I like that. There goes another version of me, because in every moment when we look back, there's several versions that could emerge. And sometimes what we have to deal with are whatever that moment tried to teach us, right? Tried to say about us. But other times we have to deal with what my reaction was and what choice I made, and how many have sometimes a different version of evil because of whatever your choice was, as opposed to what life was trying to teach you. And sometimes we have to resolve what it tried to teach us to be, right? So that we make a different choice as we move forward, right? If I'm dealing with a heartache in my life, it might teach me to never give my heart away again.
No.
And yet, maybe giving my heart away again and having it cared for is the most healing thing that could happen. But the longer I hold on to the fear of relationship, the longer it takes me to feel that healing. So there's a lot of different healings that have to come out of each moment. At least for me, because I've made wrong mistakes in reaction to it. Maybe the rest of you haven't done that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I just want to, a phrase that historians use, we like to say history repeats itself. Historians say history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And like we're saying, closing our hearts from accepting love. That has helped me kind of let go of hurts on relationships that don't work. It's not going to repeat itself. It might sound a lot alike, but it's less fatalism.
Yeah, but at least part of what you want to do right in every moment is say, what is the best possible story out of all that stuff back there that will help this moment be the best possible moment? How do I take the best from all of that and live in this moment where I have to live, and try not to hear or live out of the wrong stories of all of that, but the best stories? Yes, Kath.
Well, I'm reminded of a couple things. One is from, it's either attitudinal healing, which is related to Course in Miracles, which says we are either offering love or asking for it in every moment. And the other thing I want to say to you, my brothers and sisters from St. Francis, is you're worth every penny. I'd pay you all some kind of fee for your therapy today. Because I feel like I've really gotten, wow, I've just gotten so many tools in just a few minutes that it just blows me away. But thank you so much for sharing your hearts with me. I appreciate all of you for your participation and your stories and sharing. It's wonderful.
You know, the difficult thing, Catherine, is we were supposed to deal with both past and future. And we're almost at the end of time, and we've only gotten to your past. But how many?
That's life.
You know that you could probably use a few more sessions just about past, but we're not going to. Next week we're going to go to future. How many think you struggle more with past versus how many think you struggle more with future? Raise your hand if you're kind of more of a past struggler.
It's a toss-up.
And how many think you deal with future more? Yeah, both of them are difficult because they exert control over us in different ways, don't they? And part of our job, if we're going to be intentional about the spiritual life, is to not just assume that there's the story that we're telling or the story we're looking forward to is true, but that we intentionally move forward in the moment, looking at those two sides of things and drawing them into this moment. Well, next week, we'll go into the future, which is the one, Releasing Fear About the Future, and it talks about the 5 remembrances. And if you read those 5 remembrances, you probably will struggle with at least one of them. So read through that and figure out what to do. And we should probably have a good discussion next week about the last words before we go. All right.
Oh, are we going to read the materials for the 17th also then?
Read it, but if we take as much time talking about the future, then we'll probably take all next week on future. That's what I would guess. Okay?
Jim?
Yes.
Could I just suggest that everyone get in the habit of putting their selves on mute so that we're not hearing all the background noise until you want to speak? Yeah. Is that okay? Or
yeah, that's very important.
And just so you
Thank
know,
you
one
for
of the
bringing
ways
it up.
you can do it, if you're on a laptop computer, for example, you can have yourself muted, and usually if you'll just push the space bar for the time that you want to talk, that will mute you for a time.
Good.
Usually pretty simple that way.
Yeah.
So that you don't have to figure out where is the button, just so you know. Okay?
Good.
All right, thank you.
Well, I have a smartphone and it's the same. I have a mute button in the lower
Yeah.
left. But Jim, I wanted to tell you, if anyone is using a smartphone and they don't know how to see other faces, because I asked about that last week, if there's no button to push, you just swipe
Yeah.
to the left. You won't see everyone at once, but if you keep swiping to the left, you'll eventually see everyone.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
Just to clarify, so we're going to talk about chapter 4 next week.
Yeah.
The 5 remembrances.
I think it's maybe chapter 4. I don't have them numbered, but we're going to talk about the one that's releasing fears about the future.
Okay. It's the 5 remembrances.
It is 4.
Yeah.
It is 4.
So if you look at the syllabus that I gave you when we started, what it will do is push everything back 1 week.
1 week. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
But I hope that this, which we thought might be half of the thing, was a very rich conversation. I hope you got a lot out of it.
Thanks to everyone. And I'm going to be gone, so I'm not sure if I can be with you, but I will be with you in spirit. But I'm going to Montana to see my son and my grandkids on Monday. Yeehaw!
And remember, anytime you have to miss, don't forget that all of this we're recording, and it will be on the site so you can catch up, even if
will do. All right. Okay. Much appreciation and love to everyone. Have a great week.
All right,
be
guys,
safe.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Happy birthday, Margie, from Earl.
Oh, happy birthday. Woo woo.
Birthday?